Hello, and welcome to Weathering the Storm, a Magic game design podcast. I'm your host, Emily, also known as Chartate 101.
And I'm Praveen, also known as Gateway7.
So, today we are doing our second part in our review of the first Magic set, Alpha, Beta, and Unlimited. We did the white cards in the last episode, episode 1, and today we're going to be starting with the blue cards of the set. Starting with Air Elemental, which is a vanilla 4/4 or a French vanilla 4/4 flyer for 3 and 2 blue mana.
I think this is a fine design. Generally French vanillas are statted all right and end up being good designs. And I think one indicator of good design is a reprint in a modern set. And as we can see with Air Elemental, we got a reprint of it at Uncommon in Ixalan and other sets like that. So I think we can say pretty clearly that this is a solid design.
Yeah, for sure. I believe it was actually printed in M20. So yeah, this card's definitely a card that has stood the test of time. And I also think that, it's a very standard type of, card. It's good. It's a decent... It was one of the best creatures at the time. I think it was probably, the fourth best creature in Alpha. So...
Yeah, but overall, I think I would give it probably a 7 out of 10. It's just a solid French vanilla, which I think
I think
is
I'd
generally
agree
where
with
I
a
would
7 out of 10. Next up, we have Ancestral Recall, which is an instant for 1 blue mana that has the text, target player draws 3 cards. So, there's an argument to be made that this is the strongest card in all of Magic. The other cards in contesting that are the Moxen, Time Walk, Black Lotus, and Soul Ring. At least in my opinion, those are the ones debatable. But I think that this card is probably the strongest. So, it's a weird design because of the fact that it targets a player instead of just you, which is weird. There actually used to be decks in... the first competitive Magic deck really actually, or not the first deck, but one of the first Magic decks actually milled people out with Ancestral Recall.
That hurts, seeing
People,
such wasted potential for giving your opponents free cards.
Mm-hmm. It was Ancestral Recall and a card and Brain Geyser, which is target player draws X cards.
But overall, I think this design exemplifies one of the biggest aspects of design, and that's balance, or the biggest conflicts, and that's balance versus design. And it's that just because a card is, as we discussed in our last podcast, just because a card is poorly balanced doesn't make it inherently a bad design. So I think that overall, Ancestral Recall, really, when you look at its design, it's not limited to just the mana cost, because that's not an integral part of the card. It's really just the effect draw 3 cards, which overall is fine.
I will say, I think that I have to dock it a point or two because of the fact that it targets a player instead of just yourself, because milling 3 isn't if it was let's say it was a card that was effectively balanced, you're never milling 3, so why is the option there? They did, but players were not... I think people realized this card was powerful. I'm not entirely sure they realized how powerful.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think with that...
Because, the deck was literally called The Deck, because it was, the first Magic competitive deck. And people, hadn't played it at tournaments before. It was, the first deck that was ever at a tournament, a major tournament. So, I'm actually unsure, but I hope that the reason people were milling people with it is because they didn't realize how good it was.
Yeah, that would be probably the worst part of Magic I've seen, if people understood how good draw 3 cards on a 1 mana instant was and decided, let's make my opponent do that.
Yeah. I will say, I gotta hand it to the art. I really like the art here. I think that the subtleness of the fact that you can, see the past version of him holding his arms over his ears, like the ghostly kind of like what he was doing before, like the after image. I think the art's really good.
Yeah, I'd agree definitely. I think overall in terms of design, I'd rate this at about a 6. Overall it's solid, but I think the targeting, as something you mentioned, is unnecessary and gave players the wrong.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's also a 6. Next up, we have Animate Artifact. This is an enchantment aura for 3 and a blue. Enchant Artifact. The card is called Animate Artifact. Enchant Artifact. As long as Enchanted Artifact is not a creature, it's an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its converted mana cost. I actually really like this effect. I think it's really cool.
I agree. I think it totally works on a flavorful level in that, it's turning your artifact into a creature of its own, and, that's exactly what it says. It says it's doing. The art works in that direction as well. And honestly, it's a really fun effect, and we're pretty well designed, I would say.
Yeah, and also this card's really cheap. Like, not this version of it, but, like, another version of it's cheap. Like, this is a card that, like, I wouldn't play it myself, but if I saw someone playing this in EDH, I'd be like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I think one other thing that's important, that's really nice to note about it is, I know in our last podcast we discussed how a lot of the old wording on cards help people understand them a lot better than the actual magic keys of the cards themselves. And so one thing to note is on the original printing of the card, it has in there, this will destroy artifacts with 0 casting cost, which I think is it's a good line that's there, and it helps people understand that corner case, and especially in a game that's brand new, that's super important.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that was good to have at the time, at least. I think I'd give this a 7 out of 10. I think it's pretty sweet, honestly.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with the 7.
Next up, we have Blue Elemental Blast. This is an instant for blue mana that says choose one, counter target red spell, destroy target red permanent. Yikes.
So, old Magic played a lot with the idea of color hate spells, especially in Alpha, and one of the biggest parts of color hate spells was that often colors would dip outside of their color pie to do effects that would hurt opposite colors. And from a modern design perspective, that's not done anymore. That's completely frowned upon, because it's even though it's doing effect against a specific type, it's still breaking the rules of what the color is able to do and the rules of what the color should be able to do in terms of balance. So overall, effects like this are just inherently bad design because they harm those weaknesses.
Yeah, I think that this card is kind of the perfect axis of a terribly designed card. I think it has the fact that it's a pie break. I think there's the fact that it's way too good. Like, normally, like we've said, balance is not inherent to the card, but I think that one of the times where that's not the case is, I think that the times mostly where the cost is relevant are on cards that cost 0 mana and removal or counter spells.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I think that the fact this is 1 mana is inherent to its design, which makes it even worse. But I think that I would give this a 1 out of 10. I think this card's terribly designed. I will say, I think it's better than Red Elemental Blast. Because I feel like, to me, blue destroying a permanent is like, it's just as bad of a break as red countering a spell, but you know what? I expect blue to get dumb stuff in early Magic, but I don't expect that of red.
Yeah, I think that the argument that the casting cost matters here is fair in some regards, but also, I don't know if I completely 100% agree with it. I think on cards, such as the Ancestral Recall, for instance, I think there's a case to be made that the mana cost is relevant there. But so I don't know if I'd take it into account as much in terms of looking at the design of the card, but still think because of what we brought up, it's still a really bad design. I'd give it a 3.
Mm-hmm. Next up, we have the aforementioned Brain Geyser. This is a sorcery for X blue that says target player draws X cards. I really like this card, and there's been a lot of versions of it that are, or not versions of it, but like, there's been lots of times when they've made very similar cards. I'm surprised this card actually has not been Oh, I was going to say, why hasn't this card been reprinted? But it's on the reserved list. That would make sense. But I think the actual effect of the card is pretty cool.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's a more interesting version of Ancestral Recall. Obviously a lot weaker because it's X blue blue instead of 1 blue, but you have a lot more flexibility in the fact, and I think the fact that it targets a player here is actually really relevant in that this is an effect that I think I'd be happy to use to mill a player if I'm able to accrue enough mana. Because like 3 cards isn't enough to properly mill out somebody, but X cards, when X can be any amount of mana, I think is completely worth it if the game goes dirtily enough. So I'm a lot more lenient on that aspect than an Ancestral Recall, for instance.
Yeah, I also think that this card has a similar thing, which is that if you think about it, it's kind of just blue Fireball in terms of using it as a win con, because Channel Fireball and Channel Brain Geyser, it's just a very, very, very worse version of Channel Fireball.
I think, yeah, if you look at it purely from a mill context, I think this is definitely very similar to a Fireball. I think what makes it better is that flex.
Oh, for sure, and also 20 life versus 60 cards.
Well, yeah, of course.
Although, I could be wrong on this, I'm pretty sure that when Alpha came out, the minimum amount of cards was 40, which makes it slightly better. Not much, but slightly.
Yeah, I think overall I'd rate this a little bit higher than Ancestral Recall, so probably about an 8.
I'm actually going to give this a 9. I think this is a really cool card, and I think that Draw X cards are inherently really cool. Like, one of my favorite cards in Theros Beyond Death, it's not Draw X, but it's similar, is Thassa's Intervention. So,
yeah, I know, and typically, Draw X effects are super useful in control decks. Sphinx's Revelation, Hydroid Krasis, all those sorts of things. Those make for really fun spells to cast, because then you just manage to accrue a ton of value with the work that you put in.
Yeah. Next up we have Clone. This is a creature shapeshifter for 3 and a blue. You may have Clone enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, and it's a 0/0. First of all, I think that this card's its original text box is very funny, and I'm actually going to read it because it's funny. Upon summoning, Clone acquires all normal characteristics, including color, of any one creature in play on either side. Any enchantments on original creature are not copied. Clone retains these characteristics even after the original creature is destroyed. Clone cannot be played if there are no creatures in play. Which, that last part's not true. You can play Clone if there's nothing else in play, it'll just immediately die.
I assume it was probably a functional errata.
Yeah. I don't think it was a functional errata. I think the last line was kind of like I think that it was kind of like this will destroy artifacts with 0 casting cost on Animate Artifact, where it was kind of reminder text, where it's not, it can't be played, it's like you shouldn't. I don't know
that's
if,
fair.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I think there's definitely an argument that it's functional errata.
But overall, I think this design is super resonant. It makes it clear what it's going for, and it's a very innovative effect that, although we've seen it a ton in Magic today, at the time this is, I think, a really interesting use of the rules that Magic had, and I think that it's a lot of fun to play even today. I still jam it in a lot of my EDH decks. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure this was one of the most popular cards in the early game. It's also seen a fair amount of reprints. It saw reprints in Onslaught, and then a lot of core sets.
Yeah, overall, this is just a really good resonant design that makes sense. I'd give it a 9.
I would also give it a 9. Next up, we have Control Magic, which, first of all, clearly they didn't know what terms players would come up with, but from a modern design perspective, just having a card called Control Magic and it not being a counter spell is pretty funny.
Well, I think it makes sense in the context that
Oh, for sure,
it's
for sure.
controlling magic. It's
No,
you
no, no, don't get me
control.
wrong. It totally makes sense. I just think it's kind of funny. Because, like, they didn't know, obviously.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I should probably read the card. It's a enchantment aura with two blue with enchant creature. You control enchanted creature. I actually play this as a 2 of in my primordial alpha control deck. It's not that good, but it's decent.
Yeah, I think overall control magic. I think it's pretty much the same as clone in that the only difference between it and clone is that your opponent gets to keep a creature. Um, but and you can't use it on your own things. It's a very similar card, but I think it completely changes the tone of the effect in terms of its flavor, and the wording there. Just you control enchanted creature makes it very simple on what it's trying to do.
Despite the fact that its wording was not simple when it first came out.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I would say I like this less than Clone, but not by a lot. So I think I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.
Personally, I think I'd keep it at a 9. I think that it's just a really good both this and clone are both really good uses of people's expectations for what these kinds of effects would do and interesting implementation.
Makes sense. Next up, we have Copy Artifact, which is an enchantment for 1 blue that says you may have Copy Artifact enter the battlefield as a copy of any artifact on the battlefield, except it's an enchantment in addition to its other types. This card is really cool. I know it's very powerful because of things like the Moxen and Lotus. Actually, I think it's more. I think the bigger problem than like Moxen and Black Lotus is stuff like Time Vault. But it's still a really cool card. Like, they do similar effects now, just more balanced. Like, Throne of Eldraine had Mirror Maid, which was this, but 1 more mana and could also copy an enchantment.
Yeah, I think that the effect overall makes sense, and it's pretty much in the same vein as clone. It's pretty much in the same vein as control magic, and that it's just a little more limited in its scope of what it can grab, which might be bad in some contexts, but since early magic was dominated by powerful artifacts, this is a lot better, I would say.
Yeah. Next up we have Counterspell.
I'd rank it an 8.
Oh, sorry. I didn't say what I would rank it. I think I'd give it a 7. Next up we have Counterspell, which is an instant for 2 blue mana that it just says counter target spell. This card is very controversial along with everything it's kind of spawned, because a lot of players do not like counter spells. But I mean, they're fine. There's no problem with them design-wise. And they're kind of very important for blue to function.
Yeah, I think that people who just inherently dislike counterspells, I think it's a really dumb argument, because counterspells are pretty much the inferior versions of kill spells or a discard or those kinds of effects that counterspells operate on a very limited time window, and so the variance there in that, do I save my mana to cast a counterspell? Do I play my hand out in order to gain tempo and hope that they don't play anything good? I think that question is really good in terms of gameplay, and it's a lot more fun than, well, I have this kill spell, but I can wait a turn. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Also, this is probably not a popular opinion, but I think that the Mark Pool art from Alpha is the best art Counterspell's ever had. I love this art.
You're right. It's not a popular opinion.
People like the Jace one, I know.
I love the Jace one. It looks so cool.
The Jace one is my second favorite one.
That's fair. I'm honestly, I tend to enjoy modern art. Not modern art. The art on more recent cards a lot more. So that's probably.
I definitely do too. I definitely do. Generally do too. This is one of the exceptions to that, because I don't know. I just think that, like, I don't know. I can't really describe why I like it. I just really like this art. And also, I think it's some of the most iconic Magic art. Probably
Honestly,
up there with, like, I don't even know. I guess, like, Lightning Bolt. That's really all I can think of that's, like, as iconic of art as Counterspell.
yeah, I think that there are a ton of really Counterspell probably is one of the spells in the game with the most consistent and best art because you have
Oh,
the
for sure.
Eternal Masters version, you have the Jace version, you have the Amonkhet Force Field, you have the Mark Poole version,
Yeah.
and, there are just so many good arts for the card, and
Yeah.
it's really probably one of the best in terms of
I think
the
the
card.
only bad art, or not bad, but not as good art to me is the 5th edition art. But that's just me. The
That's
other
fair.
thing
I'm not
I'll
a
say
fan of
about
the
this card, what were you gonna say?
I'm not a fan of the Urtai art as well, but
That's the Tempest one,
um
or no, that's the
it's the wizard in red robes doing the thing with.
yeah, that's the one from Tempest. Uh, yeah, that's probably my second least favorite. Um, but I'll also say that I think I could be wrong on this. This card might have the most arts of any card in Magic. I think that's at least a possibility because it's one of the most reprinted cards.
Yeah, I think if you
Um,
exclude obviously excluding basic lands, I
oh
think
yeah, for sure.
this is in the top, probably in the top 10 contention. I think you might
I
have a
know it's one
challenge
of
for
the
stuff
top
like
10
Lightning
most.
Bolt.
Mm, I know it's one of the top 10 most
Other
reprinted cards. So
There are a lot of core set stables that might have another claim to fame, Giant
yeah,
Spider, for instance, but I'm not.
yeah, that's definitely true. Next up, we have Creature Bond. Creature Bond is an enchantment aura for 1 and a blue that has enchant creature. When enchanted creature dies, Creature Bond deals damage equal to that creature's toughness to the creature's controller. This is a really cool black card. I don't know what it's doing in blue.
Yeah, this is something that'd be perfect for black, and it's something that we see often on black cards again, where the creatures will deal damage to their controller every time they deal damage or those sorts of effects. But direct damage is not blue, and so this card is bad design.
Yeah. I will say I also I don't get the flavor really. Like I kind of get it, but the flavor's not blue. Blue doesn't have creature bonds. That's like a green thing. I don't know. This card just kind of fails on most levels. The only thing I think that I like about it is that if you take the card and put it in black, it's a cool card. So I think I'm going to give it a 2.
I think I'd give it a 3. I think the flavor does make a little sense. It's creating a psychic bond between two creatures so that when one of them dies, the other one experiences psychic backlash. I think that's the intent, at least. But it's not really that clear. And again, like you said, this would be an amazing black card, maybe even red. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I'd give it a
Yeah.
3.
Next up, we have Drain Power, which is a sorcery for blue-blue. Target player activates a mana ability of each land they control. Then that player loses all unspent mana, and you add mana lost this way. So, I don't really know how to feel about this card. On the one hand, I've never seen this card before, and I just saw it, and it's cool as hell. It's also not blue, but also I'm hesitant to say that because it's not an effect we ever really see.
I think that this would have been fine in blue if you got rid of the adding mana part. I think that
Mm-hmm.
without that, this would have been fine. But overall, that kind of fast mana production is something that's more common for black or red.
I think it could be a bend because you take a card like I think that despite being way too broken, I think inherently mana drain is not a too good or it's not a pie problem or other than maybe a small bend.
Yeah, I think that's a fair argument. I will say though, the thing that I dislike about this card the most is that it's very clunky in its effect because
Mhm.
of the way
stat
because of the way
works.
that Magic works. Because originally it was just you tap all their lands and you get the mana abilities. But because of the fact that players can, do stuff in response, they can do all those kinds of things. You have to specifically say they activate a mana ability of each land they control, then they lose all that mana, and then you gain
Yeah.
all their mana. And it's really weird, and even in a way where this card kind of gets bricked if your opponent has an instant speed response to it,
Hmm.
which I don't really like that much.
Yeah, I will say, I'm not entirely sure, but I think that this card was slightly better with batches instead of the stack, because batches are what Magic had before the stack. Um, I'm not entirely sure on that, but I think it was a little bit better with that. But
Yeah,
overall, I really like the effect. I'd say I'd give it a 7 out of 10.
I think I 5. It's just pretty clunky, even though the effect seems nice on paper.
Yeah. Next up, we have Feedback, which is an enchantment aura for 2 and a blue with enchantment. At the beginning of the upkeep of enchanted enchantment's controller, Feedback deals 1 damage to that player. Again, this is a cool black card. It's also definitely a mouthful. Uh, but, I mean, I think it's cool. It's just not a blue card.
Yeah, I think
It's also way too narrow.
yeah, definitely. I think we see a really cool implementation of this effect in, I believe, Commander 2018. I don't remember the exact name of the card. I believe it was Enchanter's Bane, but it was the 1 in a red enchantment that at the beginning of your upkeep it dealt 2 damage it dealt damage equal to an enchantment's mana cost to a target player,
Mm.
unless they sacrifice the artifact or the enchantment. So there are cool ways to do this kind of damage effect and key off of it, but the correct way is not at this abysmal of a rate, and definitely not in blue.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so, also, yes, the card was called Enchanter's Bane. Um, I would give Feedback a 3 out of 10.
I would give it a 2. I think it's just a blatant color pie break in
Mm-hmm.
a way that doesn't in a card that punishes enchantments also doesn't make sense in blue. So that's
That's
why.
true. I will say this isn't really related to the rating. I think the art is really sick.
Yeah, definitely.
Next up, we have Flight, which is an enchantment aura for blue with enchanted creature has flying. I mean, I think this card is just pretty generic, cool. I really like that the original text is target creature is now a flying creature, but that's just me.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree. This is a really solid design, and a fun one. It levitates something. It makes sense. It's called flight. It gives flying. I would give this 8. It makes sense, and it's a good effect.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm also going to give it an 8. Next up, we have Invisibility, which is an enchantment aura. Enchant creature for blue. Enchanted creature can't be blocked except by walls. So, I will say one minor thing that I do not like about something they did with Magic rules, and this is probably a pretty unpopular opinion, and also something that could be considered hypocritical based on my other opinions about functional errata. But I think that when they during Kamigawa, when they got rid of walls having inherent rules text and made it so that it had defender, I think they should have made all the cards that cared about walls care about defender, because that's what
Agree.
they meant to do.
Agree 100%. Walls are a flavorfully kind of the second they got detached from being walls and it became defender, all the flavor from it being walls doesn't really. It kind of loses the flavorful identity that it has. But
Well,
however,
every wall ever printed has defender.
well, yeah, but yeah, no, that's
Um, but I mean, other than that, though, I think this card's cool. The art is weird. It's not invisible, dude. I can still see you. But I mean, I guess he's like mid turning invisible. I don't know.
yeah. I think overall, I would rate this 6 maybe. I think
I think I'm gonna give
I
it a
think that
5.
honestly, I think this card would have made more sense if it just couldn't be blocked. I think that the walls
Yeah.
restriction feels off, and I think a lot of early Magic is it's just overly specific in terms of the different types of effects.
Yeah. Next up, we have Jump. This is an instant for blue that says target creature gains flying until end of turn. So I like this card. I like this card a lot less in a set that has flight in it. But that's just me.
I 100% agree with you. I also like it less in a set where flight is also at common.
Yeah, that's like, weird. Like I actually just scrolled up.
No, it isn't uncommon. It isn't uncommon. I did read it.
No, they're both commons.
Is it?
They are both commons. I actually just checked and I was like, oh, okay, maybe if one's at common and the other's at like uncommon or rare, I'd like it. But no, both are at common.
Huh. Oh, I must be reading it wrong then. Yeah, it's just a really weird implementation of the card itself. So I think that existence of the card really drags it down for me.
Yeah. I think I'd give it a 5 out of 10.
I can agree with a 5.
Next up, we have Life Tap, which is an enchantment for blue that reads, whenever a forest your opponent controls becomes tapped, you gain 1 life. So, this card is a big bend, because blue doesn't gain life. There are arguments to be made that blue gaining life is a pie break, because its weakness is needing to do things in response and not doing things proactively, and you could argue that gaining life proactively gives you a buffer. I'm not entirely sure if I believe that, but it's definitely bordering on a break.
Yeah, I'd agree. Again, early Magic was so purposeful, or so constantly willing to break the color pie in order to do color hate spells, and I think overall that's just bad.
Yeah, I think the reason why the thing about blue life gain is in the public conscious is because there was a card in Throne of Eldraine in blue that could give you a food token, and people were saying it was a break, but like I thought it was just a bend.
I think it's a severe bend, if not a break.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a pretty big bend. But anyway, I think this card though kind of hits, like I was saying, the trifecta of it's just a bad design because it's a break, it's a bad design because it's color hate, and it's also just not good, but also not very fun.
Yeah.
Like,
so
another weird thing about this is that if this was, like, in white, and it was, like, a mountain becomes tapped, I like it a lot more because white likes gaining life and has synergy with that. But this doesn't have synergy because it's blue.
Yeah, I also like it a lot more because it's a more effective counter to red. So
yeah.
if you're talking about mountains. So I think that overall there's easy ways that this design could have been salvaged, but as it is, it's not very good.
Yeah, and the flavor of blue, like a vampire stealing life, is also very weird in blue.
I mean, we did get Mind Drinkers in Dimir, but again, more of a.
Mm-hmm. So next up we have Lord of Atlantis. This is a creature merfolk for blue. Other merfolk you control get +1/+1 and have Island Walk. Which Island Walk means it can't be blocked as long as defending player controls an island. I love this card, and I love the precedent it's set for Magic, because Tribal is really cool.
Yeah, I agree. Tribal is a really fun new aspect to the game that makes a lot of the text on cards that's sometimes viewed as just, basically just around a flavor text, it makes it really matter. And I think that's such a cool thematic way of doing things. I will say one aspect about the card that I don't like as much, but it doesn't really factor into its design, is its reliance on real-world archetypes, as Atlantis is a real, or not a real place, but a place theoried about in normal human mythology. And
yeah, it was actually, actually, finish what you were saying first.
Yeah, overall though, early Magic tendency to talk about real places, and I didn't like that as much because it's somewhat immersion breaking in some cases. I think this is one of them because Atlantis is famously known as like the home of merfolk and everything, and or
Aquaman.
mer people or Aquaman, and it gives you Aquaman vibes in a bad way. It evokes that kind of thing without really feeling real in that regard. So it strikes me as like as it breaking the immersion of what Magic itself is. That said, the card's designed very well. So
so I kind of waited to do this because I think it's kind of a tangent, but I think there's an actually really interesting story about kind of the pop culture conception of what Atlantis is, because Atlantis was originally written about by, I believe, Aristotle, or no, it was one of the Greek philosophers, but he actually wrote about it, and it was like, the idea of it was that he wrote about it as an example of hubris, and that the idea was that it was very much not at all Greek. It was so un-Greek-like in every way, because they wanted to be like, oh, Greece is good and the other place bad, but now in every representation of it, it's all Greek because the person who came up with it was Greek, which I think is some pretty poetic irony.
Yeah, I never heard that before, but that's actually a really cool story.
Yeah, I can tell you more about it after. I think it's really neat. It's also weird that, despite being 2 pips, this is also a 2/2 for, with upside for blue, for 2 in alpha, which is weird.
Yeah, it's a very efficiently costed creature, and I think one that works really well. Actually, I think something that we forgot to mention about the design of the card was the use of Island Walk. And in general, basic land walk. For those of you who don't know, those kinds of mechanics basically allow you for the creature to be unblockable as long as an opponent controls a basic land of the given type. I think overall that it's not a very good mechanic because it hurts people for playing the colors you're playing, which basically it turns your creatures on at random times for no reason.
Yeah, and I will say that this card, I think that it's like, this card's really good. Like, it's surprisingly really good.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very, very efficient creature and very good in Merfolk travel.
Yeah. I'm gonna give this card an 8 out of 10. Despite major problems with it.
I'll give it a 7 because of Island.
Yeah. Next up we have Magical Hack. This is an instant for blue. Change the text of target spell or permanent by replacing all instances of one basic land type with another. For example, you may change Swamp Walk to Planeswalk. This is Planeswalk, Plainswalk, not the other type of Planeswalk.
We are not.
And this effect lasts indefinitely. Man, we should do Plane Chase at some point. Like, just the planes themselves.
That would be great.
That'd be cool.
We'll figure that out. Yeah, but as for Magical Hack, I think that this is a pretty bad design in terms of the fact that most of the time it's pretty useless. Although I will say that because of early Magic's reliance on a lot of color hate spells, it does become a bit more useful within the context of the set. So I'm not as low on as I might be in any other set. Like,
yeah. The newest reprint was 5th edition. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that overall this would be like a 3 for me. I think that
makes sense. I think I'm going to give it a 3 as well. I think that the one interesting thing about it is that I think that the fact that Commander exists could potentially make this card slightly better in a modern context because of the fact that if you always know you have a Commander that cares about color, then this card can almost always do something, which makes it a little bit better.
Yeah, that's fair.
Which is that's what makes it a 3 for me instead of a 2, because if it wasn't for Commander, it'd be a 2. Next up we have, let's hope I'm saying this right, Mohammadi Jinn. This is a 5/6 Jinn with flying for 4 and 2 blue. And that's it. It's just air elemental, but bigger and costs more. But not as good, because 6 mana cards is a big jump from 5.
That said, I think that it's pretty well costed in terms of that mana cost, because
for sure.
It's a 1 mana increase, but you're also getting +1/+2 on air elemental, which is really strong.
No, this card's definitely not bad.
Yeah, I know. This was actually one of the first cards I opened in one of the, probably 2015 maybe core sets, and I had a lot of fun playing with it.
Yeah, it was
very
in both M15 and Origins.
Yeah, and it's a very good curve out card for, a more controlly or a rampier.
Wait, how is this card in Origins? I thought the whole thing about Origins was that every card in it was like from those 10 planes.
Liliana was from Dominaria.
Yeah, but I guess I kind of just assume that unless it specifically like references like Llanowar or something, I always assume that Alpha cards are just not canon. Unless they like mention Urza or Llanowar.
Yeah, I'm not too up to date on Alpha lore, so you're the expert on that one.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's just surprising to me. It's not a bad thing. It's just surprising. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. I think I'm going to give it 1 less than I gave Air Elemental, so I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I think I'd give it a 7 as well.
Next up, we have Mana Short. This is an instant for 2 and a blue that says, tap all lands target player controls tap all lands target player controls, and that player loses all unspent mana.
So basically, this is, again, a decent idea, and I think as we discussed with Flight and Jump, this is a lot worse in a set with Drain Power in it. Although the effect is slightly different, because in Drain Power you do get that mana. This also costs more as a result, and they're both rare.
Isn't this just... Oh, no, never mind. I was going to say, isn't this just worse? But no, it's an instant.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, even then, it's still...
It's definitely bad. Worse, but it's not strictly worse. I thought it was strictly worse.
I did as well. I missed that. But I think overall, this is just a set doesn't need 2 of these effects. I don't know if Magic needs 2 of these effects.
Yeah, it's a pretty niche effect. I think I'm going to give this a 2 out of 10.
I'd agree with it.
Next up we have Merfolk of the Pearl Trident, which is a vanilla 1/1 for blue. Bad. Don't like it. It's bad. Merfolk were not relevant tribally because there was 1 card, so like not really. This card just really bad. I think it's funny that this card saw competitive play just because of how bad aggro creatures were.
Yeah, that's something.
Like, imagine casting this and then next turn your opponent casts Ancestral Recall.
But yeah, I mean, I generally don't mind vanilla creatures, but this is just particularly bad. It's just a 1/1 for 1, which is probably the worst.
Yeah.
Very bad.
Yeah. Also, another bad thing that I know for you is that the flavor text references Atlantis.
Yeah, but we already went over that.
Oh, for sure. I'm not saying it's any worse, I'm just saying.
Yeah. I think I'd give it overall a 3. Actually, no, I think I'd give it a 4. A 4 because it's a vanilla creature, but
I'm gonna give it a 3. I'm gonna give it a 3 just because of how especially bad it is. Next up we have Phantasmal Forces, which is a creature illusion for 3 and a blue. It's a 4/1. This is at the beginning of your upkeep. Sacrifice it unless you pay blue. I think this card's dope. It's pretty good. Actually, no, it's really good for the time. 4/1 flyer for 4, that's really good for at the time, even with very small downside, honestly.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's a pretty negligible downside if you're in a deck that's going deep enough into mana. I think one thing that's interesting about the card is that if you look at the original text,
Oh yeah, this is super neat.
the cost there isn't a blue mana symbol.
It's just
the letter
U.
U, and which is the design code for blue mana in Magic.
Yeah.
But it's something that
do you know the story behind why the blue is U?
Well, yeah, because it would be B, but that's black, and then BL is also black. So then it would.
No, but do you know why they did U for blue instead of A for black?
I do not.
It's because A is artifacts. So they couldn't do do A for black because it was artifacts, so they had to do U for blue.
Yeah, that makes sense. They probably should have just gone with L, honestly, but
they couldn't do L either though because L is land.
Oh, god damn it!
So no, it's actually really interesting.
Yeah, but overall the card is just a pretty solid design. I think I'd give it a 6. Efficient creature with a small negligible downside. But
I think I'm also going to give it a 6. Next up we have Phantasmal Terrain. This is an enchantment for blue and a blue. Man, there's a lot of blue and a blue. It's an enchantment aura, enchant land. As it enters the battlefield, choose a basic land type. Enchanted land is the chosen type. So this card's bad. Not useful because it costs 2 blue mana. If it was like 2 generic mana, it'd be decent. Like in terms of like being an effect you want to use. Like even if it was good.
Yeah, I think this is bad design, this is bad balance wise. But that said, I actually kind of like this as a design. You know, it's kind of like in the same level as something like an Evolving Wilds, where it flavorfully makes sense, and that your terrain is changing over time because of some sort of magic. And I think that changing the basic land type of land is an interesting way of getting fixing, and especially in alpha, subjecting your opponent to specific color hate.
Yeah. The one problem I have with it, though, is, like I said, I feel like if this card was even just, like, blue and then 1 generic, I think it'd be significantly better, because you need to have 2 of the same type to help you fix, which is just weird.
Which defeats the point.
Yeah, which defeats the point of fixing.
Yeah, overall, I think I'd give this a 5. It has some positive.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not the worst. I'm going to give it a 4. Next up, we have Phantom Monster, which is an illusion creature, or it's a creature illusion for 3 and a blue, flying, and it's a 3/3. I think it's decent. It's just slightly worse Air Elemental.
Yeah, you know, it gets completely bricked by Air Elemental. I think if it was, like, slightly more powerful, able to take on an Air Elemental in combat, maybe bounce off of it, it might have been more interesting within the context of the set. But overall, it's a vanilla. It's a French vanilla, and it's well costed. I'm fine with it. Actually, I think the one problem I do have with it is that if you look at the
flavor
art
text. Oh.
If you well, sure, the
flavor text as well, yeah.
Okay, first art. The art, there's nothing noticeably flying about it. It's the face of a weird monster with eyes and teeth, and it doesn't feel right for it to have flying. And then you can take.
So the flavor text is Edgar Allan Poe's quote, which I don't think either of us like real world flavor text in Magic cards. I think it's slightly better in core sets, like we discussed in the first episode, than it is in like a set that has like a world. So it could be worse, but like it's just not fitting.
Yeah, I think overall I'm giving this, since I don't think either of those really factor into the design of the card, they're just something we wanted to mention.
Yeah.
I think I'd give this a 6. It's just a fine French vanilla.
Yeah, I'm also giving it a 6. Next up we have Pirate Ship. This card is 4 and a blue for a creature human pirate, which is weird. Pirate ship can't attack unless defending player controls an island. Tap it, and it deals 1 damage to any target. When you control no lands, sacrifice pirate ship.
When you control no
Or
islands.
no islands, sorry, yeah. No islands. Also, it's a 4/3. So, this card's not good by any stretch of the imagination. But it's also a pie break. Also bad design because of Island Walk. Wait, why isn't this Island Walk?
Yeah, it's not even well balanced.
Oh, wait, no, it's not Island Walk. It's not Island Walk.
No, it's different than Island Walk.
It's Island Home.
I think
this is just Island Home.
Honestly, I think the ability would have been better if it was Island Walk.
Yeah, which is saying
Seems like
something.
it would make... Yeah.
I think that the fact that this has Island Home instantly makes it a 1 for me. I hate Island Home. I think it's the worst designed Magic mechanic of all time. Actually, that's probably biting off more than I can chew, but it's up there. The card's also
Storm,
a pie
Dredge,
break.
and Companion.
No. Those, I will defend most of those in terms of design, but not balance or competitive things. Because, like, Storm, Dredge, and Delve were all fine in Standard.
Yeah,
None of
fair.
them caused any problems in Standard. Dredge was not, or was barely playable in Standard. Storm was unplayable in Standard. And Delve was alright, but not, or it was good, but it wasn't great.
No, Delve has some really solid pieces in
Companion's
Standard.
the worst of those ones.
But yeah, overall, this is each
Y'all
of these
like
3
Commander?
abilities. Yeah, each of these 3 abilities where it makes the card go from bad to worse, and none of these these are all bad, and because the first ability is a straight up downside ability that doesn't make sense because it's barely ever a downside. It's just flavor text that sometimes kills your creatures. The second ability is a pie break. The third ability is the same thing, where it's just sometimes...
Or no, the first ability is very relevant. The last ability is
that's
terrible.
What I mean. Last ability sucks.
The first ability is just dumb. It's just Defender. Sometimes you lose Defender.
Yeah. So, I would agree with your statement of 1. There's nothing about this card that works.
Next up, we have Power Leak. This is an enchantment for 1 and a blue. It's an aura with enchantment. At the beginning of the upkeep of Okay, wait. This is so dumb. At the beginning of the upkeep of Enchanted Enchantment's controller, that player may pay any amount of mana. Power Leak deals 2 damage to that player. Prevent X of that damage, where X is the amount of mana that player paid this way. That's such a tongue twister.
I mean, it makes more sense on the original card.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, but even still, it's still a really weird effect. And again, we're going to have to say it probably more during this podcast, but direct damage is not blue. Enchantment hate is not blue. This is really weird.
I will say, I don't inherently mind enchantment hate as much, because I think that friendliness and disfriendliness to card types is a bit more nebulous than blue dealing direct damage.
Yeah, that's fair. I just don't like it personally.
Oh, for sure. I don't like it either. I think this is like a 2, maybe a 3.
I'd give it a 2 personally.
That makes sense. I think I'm going to give it a 2. Next up, we have Power Sync. So, I love this card. It's an instant for X and a blue. Counter target spell unless its controller pays X. If that player doesn't, they tap all lands they control and lose all unspent mana. That last part is flavor text. It doesn't matter. At first, when I read this card, I thought that last part was super cool, but this card is just Syncopate.
Yeah, that's fair. I think, actually, I think it's better than Syncopate, because...
It's slightly better, yeah.
If you just... I don't think it's even flavor text that much of the time, because if you just pour in enough mana where they can't pay for it on a Syncopate, and they cast, they cast their first spell of the turn, you spend all of your mana to power sync it, they can't do anything for the rest of the turn if they can't pay for Axe.
I will say this, I've played with this card in Primordial, and it's basically Syncopate. Like, I can just say, as someone who's played with this card, it's almost always Syncopate.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, but I mean, I still love the card. I think Syncopate is a greatly designed card, and I think this is just like it. I'm just gonna say, I think this is a 9 out of 10. I love this card. I think it's really well designed. Even with the weird flavor texty ability. Maybe calling it flavor text is a bit harsh, but it's definitely not often relevant.
Yeah, that's fair. I think overall this is a solid design. I'm generally just a big fan of X spells in general because when I play Magic, I'm a huge fan of modality and getting options between doing different things, and so X spells really go towards doing that. I think I'd give it an 8. It's a fine effect. I really like it, but I don't like that second ability as much.
Yeah. Next up, we have Timmy, is it Tim or Timmy? It's Tim, right?
It's Tim.
Okay. Next up, we have Tim, also known as Prodigal Sorcerer.
Timmy is the player psycho.
Yeah. But it's a creature human wizard for 2 and a blue. It's a 1/1, and you can tap it to deal 1 damage to any target. So Pie Break, but like it's cool, and also not relevant to its design, but it also is a very kind of cool place in Magic's history as being one of the cards that like, oh, people just have a cool name for it, like Bob or Gary, or what are people called? Snapcaster?
I didn't know that there was a name for Snapcaster.
Snapcaster has
one. It was
one
made after a dude. It was
yeah.
Looks like a dude. I don't know his name.
Most of the player championship cards, people call them by the guy who's is in the art.
Yeah. Overall, though, this is just Pie Break, and that's maybe has a history, but that's not really relevant to the design. For sure. I think I'd give it a.
Oh, what'd you say?
I'd give it a 3.
Oh, I agree. I think I'm also going to give it a 3. Next up, we have Psionic Blast. Shout out to Tyrant on the MSC server. But Psionic Blast is an instant with 2 and a blue. It deals 4 damage to any target and 2 damage to you. This card's like really good, actually. There's a red version of this effect, and it sees play in Canadian Highlander.
Yeah, no, Char is a super fun card. It saw reprints in, I believe, M11, maybe M13 as well, I'm not sure. But Char is a really good effect, and it does not make any sense in blue.
Both parts of this card don't make sense in blue. Like, blue can pay life, that's not a break, but it's not done often.
Yeah, I'd agree. Overall, this is just... We've said it time and time again. This doesn't work. I'm giving it a 3 for the same reasons I gave.
Yeah, I think I'm also going to give this a 3. Although, admittedly, I actually kind of like this card, despite being a terrible design. Next up, we have Psychic Venom. This is an enchantment aura for 1 and a blue. It's enchant land. Whenever enchanted land becomes tapped, Psychic Venom deals 2 damage to that land's controller.
I'm giving it a 3, same reason.
Yep, I think that's fair to say.
I will say though, I do remember reading an article on the Mothership where this card kind of helped them realize that they needed a deck size limit, because there was someone who ran a deck that was just mostly Psychic Venom and a bunch of islands, and so they would just turn all of their opponent's lands into damage dealing things, so their opponents couldn't cast spells at all.
That's funny. Next up we have Sea Serpent, which is a creature serpent. It's a 5/5, 5 and a blue, that has Island Home. Not keyworded on this card, but Sea Serpent can't attack unless defending player controls an island. When you control no island, sacrifice it. Which, Island Home is an interesting story and a very dumb story, which is that they keyworded this effect for 1 set, then unkeyworded it and never... And I think it's the only time ever in Magic when something has been unkeyworded.
I think they unkeyworded unblockable at some point, or
I don't think
some mechanical.
okay, so Indestructible, they didn't... They kind of did. So what happened was that Indestructible used to be... It wasn't a mechanic. It was just a thing. Like, this creature is indestructible. Like, that's just what the word indestructible means. It wasn't really a keyword. It was rule-wise, but it wasn't written like one. I don't know if unblockable... I'm pretty sure that unblockable was not a keyword. It was just rules text that said... and that just unblockable was rules text that meant something.
Yeah, I wasn't entirely sure. I was just making a guess. Anyways, as for Sea Serpent, for the same reasons as Pirate Ship, bar the color pipe break, I'm giving it a 2 because it's
also I just
it's
checked.
As bad as Pirate Ship, but
Island Home was 5th edition.
Yeah, I also checked about Snapcaster Mage. That was Tiago Chan who designed.
Yeah,
it.
People call it Tiago.
I have not heard anyone call it Tiago.
I don't know. I'm just guessing. I'm just getting that from the fact that when they did the Lackey bot like nicknames, it was one of the first things that someone suggested. So, but also another thing, I love this card's art. I don't know. I think it looked really good.
Yeah, it looks pretty solid.
Yeah, but I mean, overall, don't like this card. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10.
I already gave it a 2.
Oh, sorry. Next up we have Siren's Call. Jeez, this is long. This is an instant for a blue that says, cast the spell only during an opponent's turn before blockers are declared. Creatures the active player controls attack this turn Fable. At the beginning of the next end step, destroy all non-wall creatures that player controls that didn't attack this turn. Ignore this effect for each creature the player didn't control continuously since the beginning of their turn. I don't even know what this really does. Like, do you know what this does?
Yeah, I think it forces your opponent to attack with everything they have and that was unable to attack for some reason is destroyed, except for walls.
Okay.
Which is a really weird effect, and
it's mega flavorful.
It is flavorful. I think the destruction part isn't very flavorful.
I think that's what the Sirens did, though. They lured people to their deaths.
Yeah, they lured the people that came to them, but
that's true.
This creatures that didn't
Wait,
attack.
never mind. This isn't flavorful at all. This is like anti-flavor.
Yeah, so I would say if you get rid of that last line of text, I would give this a solid. I would probably give this a 6. With that line of text, I'd give it a 4.
Yeah, I'm also not sure how blue creatures your opponents control attack this turn of Fable.
I think manipulating combat is something that blue has been able to do in the past, but
I think it'd be like a
this
small
is definitely primarily red, but still, yeah. I think it's in blue.
I think I'm gonna give this a 3.
Again, I already gave it a 4.
Yeah. Next up we have Sleight of Mind. This is an instant with, for blue, with change the text of target spell or permanent by replacing all instances of one color word with another. For example, you may change target black spell to target blue spell. This effect lasts indefinitely. Again, weird card, not good except very limited circumstances. I'm giving this... I don't remember what I gave the other one, but I'm giving this whatever I gave the other one.
I would agree with that. That seems like the fair place to put it. Also, damn, there are a lot of cards left.
Next up we have Spell Blast, which is an instant for a blue, X and a blue, counter target spell with converted mana cost X.
I'm fine with this. You know, it's I generally like the X designs, and I think that this is an interesting implementation of forcing you to like do a syncopate effect where you have to pay the mana cost of how much that player has left. In this one, it's play the cost of the card, which I think I like.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I mean, it's not that good, but it's cool.
Yeah, I'd give it a solid 7.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 7 as well. Next up, we have Stasis, the card with the single highest salt score on EDHREC, above Armageddon, which is an enchantment for 1 and a blue that says players skip their untap steps at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Stasis unless you pay blue. This card's dumb.
Yeah, I don't think there's any card with the line players skip their untapped step in it is probably just inherently bad, because there's no way that anyone's having fun when you play a Stasis.
Yeah, I think this card sucks. I think that also the art is not cool. Like, I get what they're going for. And I get what the flavor of it is. I don't like it, is what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I don't like it.
Honestly, I enjoy it because it's just surreal in context of Magic art, but that does not rescue the design at all.
Yeah.
I'm giving it
What are you giving it?
a 2. I really hate Stacks.
I actually like Stacks. I don't like this card because I feel like I like Stacks when the Stacks is on. I don't like Stacks decks. I like Stacks cards that do other things that you can play in non-Stacks decks. But that's just me. Next up we have Steel Artifact. This is just mind control, but for artifacts.
Yeah. I think this is a pretty bad card, but the design-wise, it's pretty much. I think it's less flavorful than Control Magic because it's stealing an artifact.
Control Magic, not mind control.
It's weird. Yeah, but overall it's fine. I'd give it a 7. I think it works less in the context of the flavor, but overall it's still a 7.
I think this card is significantly less cool and worse than the other one, Control Magic, because of the fact that it's so much more narrow. Like, artifacts are a lot more hard to come by. If this was artifact or enchantment, I think I would probably give this like an 8, but I think I'm going to give this like a 6 because of how narrow it is. Like, it's a sideboard card, but I don't think that there aren't as many high mana artifacts as there are high mana creatures.
Yeah, definitely. The only good artifacts in the set were the incredibly cheap ones. So.
Yeah. Next up we have Thought Lace, which is an instant for blue that says target spell or permanent becomes blue. This card sucks for the same reasons I already said. Yeah, it's just, I give this a 2. What do you say?
I'd give it a 2 as well.
Next up we have Time Walk, which is sorcery for 1 and a blue that says take an extra turn after this one.
I have Time Twister next.
Time Walk comes first because of the space.
I guess ours are sorted differently. Whatever. Time Walk it is.
Technically, I'm looking at.
It really doesn't matter. We can
whatever.
Time Walk.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair. But yeah, I think that this card is very cool for the precedent it sets because extra turns are very cool.
Definitely, I think that they're some of the most cool things in Magic in terms of just you get a chance to expound on the you already have, and although obviously way overcosted, I
you mean undercosted?
One thing that it probably should, take a hint from.
No. Time Walk, infamously overcosted card.
Did I say overcosted?
You said overcosted.
Oh no.
We need in MSEM we need a 1 mana Time Walk. That's what's gonna save the format.
You are right. That's what we need to defeat Spellfist Gaijin.
Turn 1 wins.
Yeah. Yeah, but overall, I think that it probably should exile, as a lot of modern cards do, but with the technology they had, I think it's really solid, and it's fun. I'd give it a 7.
Mm-hmm. Exile, I actually think it's shuffle back into the owner's library. I think that'd make for a fun and interactive game of Magic.
I think also if it was an instant speed and cost 5 blue, that would be cool.
But yeah, I think this card's dope, aside from the issues of costing, so I think I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Next up we have Time Twister. which is a sorcery for 2 and a blue that says each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library and draws 7 cards. I think their card's cool.
I'm a huge fan of wheel effects, and this is...
It's by far the weakest Power 9, like, by a significant margin.
Oh, definitely. It's still very good,
honestly,
though.
I don't think this card's in the top 20 most powerful cards in Magic.
Yeah, that's... I don't know if I'd agree with that, but I think it's a fair argument.
I think it's probably, like, low 20s. It could be, like, 19 or 18.
Yeah, I can see that being true, but overall, I think it's a really fun effect. I think generally, I love cards that start the game and give them a lot of fuel for aggro decks. I love these kinds of cards so much that I put them in my control decks, even when they are not bad for me.
Yeah,
they're not good, but I
think it's hilarious. I think it's hilarious that this card's legal in Commander.
Oh yeah, the only format it's banned in Legacy, restricted in Vintage, Commander, whatever.
Yeah. So, I don't like it that much, honestly. I'm not a huge fan of wheel effects. There's nothing bad about them, like, design-wise. I think I'd give this, like, a 7 out of 10.
I'd give it a
9. Next up, we have Twiddle, which is an instant for blue mana that says you may untap target artifact, creature, or land.
Tap or untap.
Yeah, sorry. Did I say untap or tap?
You said untap.
Got it. I really like this card. Actually, I really like tapping and untapping in general. Like, in terms of, like, spells doing it.
Yeah, I think this is a solid design.
Yeah. It's pretty generic, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think this is just solid. I'd give it a 6. It's fine.
I think I'm going to give this like an 8 or a 9. I honestly think it's super cool. I also think that the flavor is amazing. Like, this is some of the best flavor in Alpha. Not in the art, but just... Because, like, when you're twiddling your thumbs, you're not really doing anything. And if you cast this and untap a land that you aren't, like, doing something broken, like, you just untap the land you spent this with, you're just twiddling your thumbs doing nothing.
Yeah, I think...
Which I think is what it's going for.
Yeah, I also think that it's just like to slightly fidget with, which I think is like the physical action of tapping, and I think
that's also true. Yeah,
I think that specifically tapping and I think Twiddle kind of exemplifies this, but it really puts into perspective, like it really takes into account in its flavor, like the flavor of the physical actions that you're taking while you're playing the cards. So yeah. I think that aspect of it is really.
Don't say it too much before we get to Falling Star and Chaos Orb.
Oh God! Oh fuck.
Next up, we have Unsummon, which is an instant for 1 blue mana that says return target creature to its owner's hand. This card sees reprints all the time. It was reprinted in M20. It'll probably be reprinted in M21, given that Teferi's involved, and he does a lot of this.
Yeah, this is just...
I would bet we get new art, and I'm happy about that, because I'm one of the 5 people on Earth that likes Teferi.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that Unsummon is just a really solid removal spell, and I think it's kind of a better version of a card like Twiddle, for instance. I think it doesn't really reflect that physical action, but what it does is it has a lot more substantial impact on gameplay, and it's still able to be used on your own creatures to save them. So it adds a pretty cool dimension to the game.
Yeah, I think I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10.
I'm going to give it a 9 as well.
Oh boy, next up we have Vesuvan Doppelganger. This is a creature shapeshifter for 3 blue. You may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it doesn't copy that creature's color, and as of the beginning of your upkeep, you may have this creature become a copy of target creature, except it isn't a creature of that a copy of that creature's color, and it has this ability. That's a mouthful, and not for very much effect. This card would be so much cheaper if you got rid of the color part.
Definitely. I think it would score higher too, because it just adds a lot of complexity and squishing of all the words together that it makes it a lot more confusing to understand as a reader.
Yeah. I think it's overall cool in what it does other than that, which is why I think I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10.
I think I'm going to give it a 7. I really like it as a clone variant that shifts constantly throughout the game.
Yeah, it feels weird that we got clone and a clone variant both in the first set.
I mean,
But
we did get like 3 variants on
God.
Mana Sync and Slate of Mind.
Yeah. Next up we have Volcanic Eruption, which is a sorcery for X blue blue blue, which says destroy X target mountains, and then it deals damage to each creature and each player equal to the number of mountains destroyed this way.
1, fuck this.
What's 2? Oh, you're saying 1 the score.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying like a list of things you hated about
Nope,
it.
giving this card a 1, I hate it.
I
It's bad.
agree. I agree this is a 1. Moving along. Next up we have Wall of Air. This is a creature defender, or a creature wall, but has defender now. It's a 1/5 for 1 blue blue with defender and flying. I think this card's alright, but I don't really like how it plays.
Honestly, I'm fine with how it plays. I think that giving wall decks, an option to block flying creatures is pretty nice, and
That's
I don't
fair.
mind wall strategies that much, honestly. So I'm fine with the card personally. I'd give it a
Yeah.
6.
Shove this in all your Pramicon decks
Hell
for
yeah!
for your wall tribal.
This goes straight into Arcades.
Yeah, I think I'm giving this a 6 out of 10. Next up, we have Wall of Water, which is a creature wall for 1 blue blue that has defender. It's a 0/5 and has the activated ability for blue mana. Wall of Water gets +1/+0 until end of turn. This is such a weird effect for a wall and also for a blue card, because blue does not get fire breathing. But it's also fire breathing on a defender, which makes it alright.
Yeah, I think it works the same way as haste on a defender creature like we see in Future Sight.
Which I defend that card a lot. I love the haste on a defender creature.
Yeah, I'd like that a lot. What I do like about this card, though, is that the flavor works really well, because it's like you are pumping. It's a wall of water, and blue mana is kind of like water in this game. So basically, the flavor of it is that you're just pumping water straight into it, and it's getting bigger and bigger the more water you just throw at it. I think it works really well in that con.
I'd also like to say, I think the art on both Wall of Air and Wall of Water are both gorgeous.
Oh, absolutely. These look amazing.
Next up, we have Water Elemental, and this is the last card for tonight.
I'd give Wall of Water a 7.
Oh, sorry. I also give Wall of Water a 7. Water Elemental is a vanilla 5/4 for 3 blue blue. I think it's cool.
I have no opinion on this card. I think
I think it's a 5 out of 10. It's just not a good card, but
I think it's a good way for blue to break the walls in this set, because blue doesn't have many creatures. They just go over the walls, but I think having a ground creature that's able to take them out makes sense.
God, imagine playing this set in limited.
Yikes.
Imagine drafting Alpha.
Well, they did that, didn't they? With
they did do that,
8
but
famous people.
Yeah, draft became an officially sanctioned Wizard format in Mirage, I want to say. Or no. It was before Mirage, but Mirage was the first time there was booster drafts as the main form. I forget what it was before that.
But yeah, other than that, I think Water Elemental is just fine. It's good. I'd give it a 7. It's just, like, solid.
I'm giving it a 5 just because of how generic it is. And, like, I don't know. I don't think it's nearly as iconically generic as some of the other ones. I think it's weird that it's, like, I don't know. I think that vanilla... Like, I get that blue shouldn't have a 5-mana 5/5. That doesn't mean I'm not going to be complaining about blue getting less than a 5-mana 5/5.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna make my score 6. I think that makes more sense
that's valid.
in the context of the card.
Yeah.
But overall, I'm generally high on vanilla designs as long as they're not offensively weak.
Yeah.
Because that's really the only design points a vanilla card has is its power, its toughness, and its mana cost.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is pretty solid in terms of a vanilla creature.
Yeah, I agree. So this has been Weathering the Storm, and that's all we have for tonight. We're going to be recording probably sometime in the next week or so the black cards and yeah, let's hope it goes well. So,
Yeah, thank you so much for listening.
Yeah. See you on the next episode of Weathering the Storm.